People sometimes ask me if I have a favorite letter or document or artifact, and I have several of them. As far as national history goes, this is one of my very favorites. This is a letter written in response to Dr. John Rogers, the Episcopal Bishop of New York. Word had just reached the Americans, including General Washington, that Fat George, our king, George III, had decided not to hire any more Germans to come fight us, known as Hessians, and had turned his attention to France again, and decided to grant us our independence. In fact, an interesting letter I don't have at hand is at the Huntington Library, and that's the original letter of the king to the prime minister, in which he says to go ahead and grant us our independence. Only he hated that word, and he crosses out independence, puts a little caret, and says a separation above it. But at any rate, word got back to America, and there was huge rejoicing. If you can imagine, the first colonies ever really to break away from their mother country, and they were doomed from the beginning. Only George Washington knew that divine providence was on their side. Well, a very flowery letter was written to General Washington, many, but one by this Dr. Rogers, who had been his chaplain at one time. And Dr. Rogers wasn't able yet to go back into New York where his church was, because the British, the Hessians, were still there, even though the war was over. So he had to wait a while for the British to clear out. And he wrote a letter to George Washington at his headquarters and said, now they'll know you throughout all our history. General, they'll be naming states and territories and roads and children, and all of these things were true after you for winning our independence. Well, how do you respond to that? This is how the general did it. Dear sir, I accept with much pleasure your kind congratulations on the happy event of peace, with the establishment of our liberties and independence. Glorious indeed has been our contest. Glorious if we consider the prize for which we have contended, and glorious in its issue. But in the midst of our joys, I hope we shall not forget that to divine providence should be ascribed the glory and the praise. This was a great man. It was George Washington to his chaplain.